Hey guys, Arrogant Templar here. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I was pretty happy with the way Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island turned out. I mean, I know everybody liked the big Star Wars review, but it's kind of nice to take a movie that I really like personally and kind of explain my love for it and explain kind of the main themes and go through the plot. Um, a fan of, or a friend of mine wanted me to focus more on the storytelling aspect of when I'm doing a movie review because he said he can't watch movies anymore because they're just too degenerate. Which I can't really blame him for, but he still likes the stories, and he likes when someone tells the story and kind of puts their own spin on it, which I think is a good idea. It's definitely an improvement over what I was doing because I was kind of still stuck in that old kind of newspaper style movie review. So reactionary reviews, as I've kind of come across, is I'll just keep repeating it so people kind of get the format down. I read through basically my recollections, plus I do normally have a summary open that I glance at while I'm doing. So I will just give my impressions. I'll talk about main themes. I'll give my opinion on characters. It kind of combines my old reviews, kind of maybe some storytelling with the character profiles. And I kind of do the character profiles with some political stuff on a bigger scale. So Sinister. Sinister is one of my all-time favorite horror movies. Um, it kind of to me took a very good classic horror genre and made it a bit smarter. There's nothing particularly unique about it, although I really do like what they did with the villain and how they set up the plot and the story itself. I actually thought was quite good. But what's really kind of new is they kind of just took a horror concept and they took it a bit more seriously and they kind of put an interesting spin on it. And sometimes it's just okay to just play it safe and to just say, okay, we're not going to do anything wild and crazy. We're just going to take something that works. We're going to take some traditional horror concepts or some traditional action concepts, and we're just going to try and do a real good job of it. And we don't need to be the most creative possible. And Sinister is like that. Actually, it's the review I wrote of it. I don't have it anymore. I deleted my old blog without remembering to download the stuff off of it. Most of the stuff there was not particularly interesting, anyways. But yeah, the first movie review I wrote for the blog was actually one on Sinister. So without further ado, let's begin. So Sinister opens with Super 8 footage of a family of four standing beneath a tree. Super 8 footage, you know how that goes. I think it's silent. There's that noise of the film projector running, the noise, which I find really hypnotic and very relaxing, and it really almost kind of puts me into a trance. I really love the sound of a film projector going. I used to work as a projectionist actually, and I really like to just kind of stand there and listen to the projectors. Nowadays, it's all digital, and you don't have film reels anymore. It's all just on hard drives, which has a lot of advantages, but I still kind of feel nostalgic. So, anyway, so there's a family of four standing beneath a tree with hoods on their heads and nooses around their necks. An unseen figure saws through the branch, which is acting as a counterweight, and allows the figures to drop. Um, I think they're standing on a bridge, on a branch. I forget exactly, but basically, an unseen figure triggers their deaths, and the family of four die through hanging. It's a pretty effective opening scene. It's very creepily shot. This movie has very good cinematography, so we're left with this kind of this scene, and there's not really an explanation. This family of four hanging themselves in a very horrific way. So then, months later, we are introduced to our protagonist, played by Ethan Hawke. I'll just call him Ethan Hawke. It's too hard to remember the different characters from all these movies, so I'll just call him Ethan Hawke. So Ethan Hawke is a true crime writer who hasn't had a success in years. He wrote a really good best-selling book a decade or so ago and has been living off the money since. Uh, his book is actually much beloved. He's kind of famous. It's a classic. He's tried writing a couple other books, but he has not been able to capture the success of his original work. And so, to a large extent, the movie represents him almost making a Faustian bargain with the forces of the unknown to try and become a successful writer again. His struggles and kind of his writer's block are very relatable, especially if you're someone like me who likes to write and likes to well, do these videos, obviously. And sometimes you have a bit of writer's block. I know it doesn't seem like it with the number I put out, but I tend to film a bunch of these in like one day. So I'll sometimes go for weeks not being able to do them. So I can really relate to that and kind of the desperation of trying to get your muse going, especially if you're trying to provide for your family. Also, as we go along, an important thing to understand about horror movies is almost always the descent into madness and the descent into contact with the powers of darkness results in original sin of some description. Um, Someone has to make contact with the other side. Demons kind of operate by an unspoken code of conduct that they can't see you unless you see them. Unless you make the first contact and you reach out to them in some way, or you commit a sin or something, then they can't touch you. So generally speaking, in horror movies, they'll have the kids will have sex or something, and that's kind of a form of original sin. Or someone will kill someone, or someone will like with the ring. They're watching the videotape that they're really not supposed to be watching because it's something supernatural. It's something from another dimension. And as you watch the tape of the ring, the demon in the tape can see you as you see it. It's kind of this exchange of vision. It's kind of, as I said, related to original sin. You're committing a crime and then you're being extremely punished for the weight of your sins because the wages of sins are death. It's also similar to a concept in Eastern religions. I forget what it's called again. But it's when you light incense in front of the deity, and the idea is that the picture of the deity you can see it as it can see you, and I think icons are somewhat similar. So anyway, so Ethan Hawke moves into the house where the hanging went, hoping that being in the area he can research the events of that crime or that mass suicide and do a book on it and get inspiration because his family's in economic trouble. So he moves in there with his two children, Ashley and Trevor. They immediately begin to um, experience night terrors. Classic element of horror. Children are generally regarded as being more in tune to the supernatural because they're more open minded. When you get to be like my age or your age, probably if you're listening to this, I hope at least, you get more cynical. You don't just you have to learn to kind of separate yourself a bit from your feelings or inclinations. If you hear a noise, you don't think it's a ghost. Children are a lot more open-minded, and their minds have not built up the mental defenses against these things. They don't have the reason. Um, so yeah, the kids start freaking out. Let's see here. Ethan Hawke reveals that he intends to use the case of the murdered family for his new book, and hopes that he will be able to research the fate of uh, the the family who hung themselves and discover what happened with the 10-year-old. Apparently, there's a 10-year-old girl who disappeared when the murders were happening, which leads him to believe that the 10-year-old girl was kidnapped when the murders were taking place, probably by some sick guy. So Ethan Hawke is scouting around, and he discovers in the attic a projector that contains several reels of Super 8 film, much like the film from the opening scene. And the footage, at least at each label, is uh, the label of each film, sorry, has an innocent home movie title like Pool Party, Barbecue, Family Hanging Out, Sleepy Time. He discovers, though, and he kind of has this cool setup in his office when he plays them, they're all snuff films. Um, Lawn Work is someone being torn apart by lawnmower. It doesn't actually show it, but it sounds horrifying. Sleepy Time is a couple bound in their bed, getting stabbed to death. Pool Party is electrocuting people in the pool. BBQ is, well, lighting people on fire. So he just discovers these horrific movies with no real explanation. Now, what a normal person should probably do at this point in time is say, okay, this is really screwed up. I'm going to turn this into the police. I'm going to wash my hands of it. But there's an element of greed here and an element of ambition, and this is Ethan Hawke's original sin. If he had have just walked away and said this is not something I should deal with, things probably would work out okay. But he's eager. He needs his success. His pride tells him that he can go on, that he can solve this mystery, and he doesn't confide in anyone. He has committed his original sin, and thus sin. Now, as he's watching the videos, he starts to look at them, and he notices there's this strange demonic-looking figure watching um, the murders taking place, and he finds that it's at weird kind of improbable angles. Like in one, he's at the bottom of a pool, and we start to have Ethan Hawke seeing this demonic figure in various places. He also finds that there is a symbol in each of the movies along with the demonic figure. Now the problem is the movies all contain titles on them, and they're very far apart, so it can't be the same person, can it? There can't be the same person killing people over 40 to 50 years. Um, so let's see here. Upon inspecting the lid of the box, he discovers childish drawings depicting the murders, along with crude sketches of a demon named Mr. Boogie. You've probably guessed what the twist will be, but we'll just keep going. So he goes to talk to a local deputy and discovers that the murders depicted in the films took place at different times beginning in the 1960s and in different cities across the country. He also learns that some of the families were drugged before being killed and that a child from each family went missing following the murder. He also learns that some of the families were drugged. Okay, let's see here. The deputy refers Ellison to a local professor of the occult and demonic phenomenon. To decipher the symbol in the films, Jonas tells Ethan Hawke that the symbols are that of a pagan Babylonian deity named Bagul, who would kill entire families and then take one of their children into his realm in order to consume their soul. So, is it an illusion? Is it some satanic cult? Is it the actual demon? We aren't really sure yet. Um, and there's really kind of a good sense of tension in the movie because we aren't really sure where it's going, and he just kind of continues to carry along down this path. Meanwhile, stuff with his kids keeps getting weirder and weirder and weirder. Um, One night, Ethan Hawke spots Bagul in the bushes and rushes outside, armed with a baseball bat, only to find that his son is outside. Um, so while he's prowling around outside, he encounters a black Rottweiler. The dog sees the missing child standing behind Ethan Hawke and flees in terror of the child. The second night, Ethan Hawke hears a noise within the home and investigates once again. Um, let's see here, and begins to be chased around the house by children in various states of decay. All these strange children begin to show up, and they appear to be falling apart, obviously having their souls consumed by the demon. Okay, so after he checks in on his daughter, he finds her painting her family's murder with Bagul, um, which deeply disturbs him. On the third night, Ellison hears the film projector running and goes up to the attic. There he finds all the missing children watching one of the films. Bagul suddenly appears before the camera, uh, takes the camera, and the film's the yeah. So yeah, Bagul appears and Ethan Hawke runs away, managing to escape. Finally, he does what he should have done in the first place and takes the camera and films in the backyard burning them. He still doesn't think to tell people, though. He still doesn't really tell anybody, hey, I found all this stuff. Um, so he awakens his wife and tells them they are moving back to their old house. So at their old home, get a call from the professor of the occult who sends him historical images associated with Bagul. The images have been partially destroyed by early Christians who believed that the images of Bagul served as a gateway for the demon to come from the spiritual realm to the mortal world. Very interesting. The images included the symbol from the murders along with a scorpion, a snake, and a black beast. Now, I forgot to mention it, but there was a snake earlier in the attic, and there was also a scorpion. So it's increasingly looking like it's Bagul. Now, they also added that people, especially children who saw the images of Bagul, the demon would enter them through the image and possess them. So, as this is happening, he hears another voice, now back at his old house, and discovers yet another box of films with a, uh, a kind of a subtitle added under home movies, extended cut endings. He manages to piece them together and watches it. Meanwhile, the deputy who he consulted with earlier is eagerly trying to tell him. He has discovered that there's a link between the murders. Every family had previously lived in the house where the last murder took place, and each new murderer occurred shortly after the family moved from the crime scene into their new residence, meaning that Ethan Hawke is now the next one in the line. As Ethan watches the footage, it depicts the missing children coming on screen following each murder, revealing themselves to actually be the killers, under Bagul's possession before suddenly disappearing. Before he can react, Ethan Hawke becomes lightheaded, and upon inspection of his coffee cup, he notices a bright green liquid mixed with the coffee, and finds a note reading, "Good night, Daddy," before losing consciousness. His daughter, the one who had been drawing the pictures of the family being killed, appears behind Ethan Hawke, revealing herself to be the drugger under the possession of Bagul. Ethan Hawke awakens to find himself, his wife, and his son bound and gagged. Ashley approaches holding the 8mm film and promises that she will make him famous again, granting him what he so deeply desired. Ashley then murders her family with an axe, using their blood to paint images of cats, dogs, and unicorns on the walls. With her work complete, Ashley views the Super 8 film of her murderers, which concludes uh, with an image of the missing children watching her. Bagul appears, causing the children to flee in fear. He lifts Ashley into his arms and disappears with her. Actually, it shows him going into what looks kind of like a dormitory almost in the film projector, where there's a line of doors that each of the children go into. The film concludes then with the image of the box of films in a new family's attic, accompanied by a new reel entitled House Painting. The camera slowly appears away from the box, and Bagul appears on screen, smiles, and the film ends. So that's basically the plot of Sinister. What I found really interesting about it is the whole concept of a demon that lives in images. I kind of find it interesting in kind of a thematic way because, to a large extent, the image has always been seen as possessing a power. That there is something spiritual between the person who's looking at the image and the image itself. Like I said, or icons, and to a greater extent, in Eastern religions, images serve as portals to heaven or portals to a supernatural realm. Meditating or focusing on a sign is said to give certain insights. Of course, the obvious example of this would be something like tarot cards. Because, I mean, you don't actually need tarot cards. If you have them memorized, you can just always. You don't really need pictures. But the pictures on the tarot cards invoke something primal in the brain and allow the person, theoretically at least, to reach into the spiritual realm and pull this stuff out. Meditation aids the use of objects to get in touch with a different realm is fairly common. In Catholicism, we have something called a monstros, which is like a big sun-like thing that the Eucharist is placed within, and you stare at it. Actually, monstrous, I believe, just is Latin for "look at me" or "see me," or just something grand that captures and holds your attention. It's kind of gotten a more sinister, if you'll forgive the pun, meaning. I think it's especially kind of relevant in the context of the modern day, and it kind of serves as a metaphor, getting into the politics a bit more, for things just like degenerate movies, TV shows, etc. Very much people are extremely susceptible to any kind of media. If they see something on TV, it very often kind of becomes an integral part of their psyche. They can see it on TV and suddenly it becomes real for them. They gain an insight into it more or less, and it very easily influences them. If you notice social change on issues like gay marriage, religion, abortion, etc., tend to come after there's a TV show or movie which promotes the concept. So, in a very real sense, in the modern era, it can be said that there are demons lurking within the images. There's also the idea that by looking when you should look away, you are inviting the demon into you. You're pursuing a knowledge that was not meant for humans, that's not healthy for humans, and isn't something that's good or helpful or or just healthy for you. You're inviting that in by pursuing something that no human was really meant to ever pursue, and that's kind of the original sin. The original sin of Ethan Hawke's character was in his obsession with being ambitious, with a willingness to, when he was in over his head, to continue beating a dead cow, of not confiding in his with his family and the other people, of not hoping that other people might be able to assist him. So, like all falls, the original sin is always pride. Is always the pride that somehow the laws of God and history will be suspended for you, just because it's you. Because, as I always like to say, as George R. Martin put it, all men must die, and all men must serve. And in ignoring both those things, Ethan Hawke's character opens the door towards his own destruction. And by looking at the images, he allows the demon of images to come at him, corrupting his children and ultimately leading to his death. So I think I don't need to go into too much more detail. I think the kind of metaphor is fairly obvious for anyone who watches this channel and anyone with similar political views. I really like this movie. I think it's a great film. I was really, really scared watching it. I found the way it was shot, the plot kind of interesting, the villain kind of interesting, even if Bagul is kind of admittedly a lame name. Overall, though, I think it's a damn good movie. Um, and that's about all I have to say. This is Argent Templar signing out.